Welcome to Viking Preparedness. I am Pastor Joe Fox. I got called to task on some comments I made in my last video where I reviewed sort of Rogue One, and then I kind of drew some tactical lessons learned, prepper lessons learned on that. And so I'd like to set the record straight in this video. It concerns shooting people multiple times, and how many times should you shoot somebody? All right, stay tuned. Cue the intro. If you haven't read this book, you probably should. All right, I'm back. Hey, you know what? If you're watching this video on a channel other than Viking Preparedness, you're watching somebody who's ripping me off. So flag it, come back to Viking Preparedness. All right. I made some comments that were obviously taken out of context, and perhaps I was not as clear as I should have been. And so I'd like to set the record straight. How many times should you shoot somebody who needs shooting? I said something to the effect of, you shoot somebody, they're laying there dead. If you shot them once, shoot them twice. Boom, boom. Make sure they're dead. And then I made a silly little joke and, whatever. Okay, here's the reality. In my mind, so it's not the reality, it's where I was in my mind. I was in that situation. I was in the situation being portrayed in the Star Wars movie where it's a guerrilla forces fighting the forces of evil and, shooting bad guys, right? And so that's where I was when I wrote the note, and that's where I was when I was making the comment. If you do that today in America, you will probably go to jail, and you will certainly be sued by the surviving family members of the person you shot multiple times after you didn't need to shoot them anymore, which is how it will be phrased. I'm not a lawyer. I'm not a prosecuting attorney. I am not an attorney general. It is imperative that you understand the laws of your state before you start carrying a gun, let alone using one. All right, during peacetime, regular, as we are now, conditions. The laws are different where I am here in Kansas and Arkansas. Kansas has what's called a castle doctrine. Go Kansas. Arkansas does not. And so there are differences there in how one can, should, and must act when confronted with a potentially deadly situation armed with a handgun or long gun or whatever. And so you need to know your laws and that kind of thing. But let's just be pretty clear. Generally speaking, understanding I'm not a lawyer, as a civilian and probably as a cop too, you are only allowed to shoot as long as there is a threat. And that threat is defined by different states differently, but generally speaking, a threat of life or death, right? If I don't do this, I may die. Or this person may die. Do I need to say check with a lawyer again? And so once that threat ceases to exist, you have shot the person, they have fallen down, their gun has spun across the room there. Are you still justified in shooting? I think the simple answer is probably no, but man, there's a lot of gray area, and I know a lot of law enforcement officers. I've trained a lot of law enforcement officers, and it really depends on how you can articulate the perceived threat. There is a reason police officers say, stop resisting, show me your hands, over and over and over again. I'll leave that at that. But yeah, you have to be able to articulate the perceived threat to you and yours every time you pull the trigger. And every bullet is accountable, right? And so generally speaking, no, you can't shoot the dead guy 6 more times, legally, under current conditions in America. According to the Geneva Convention, you can't do that either. So there's a time of war, right? What happens in war and what doesn't happen in war, that war is a horrible thing, right? And so, in my mind, I was in the movie. I'll just stick with that. The people who corrected me were right. Don't be going around shooting dead people again. Don't be shooting the wounded guy who no longer poses a threat again if you don't want to get into legal trouble in the current situation. What I was referring to in my mind again, is what I call condition black. The rules have changed. It's back to condition black. Bad place to be. You don't want to be there. And I hope that day never comes. And so, please don't be out there shooting people that don't need to be shot. All right. I hope that was helpful. All right. I'll see you out there.